Look, I have a buddy!
He does have a buddy. This is such an aggressive question. This is probably the most aggressive question of the day we've ever had.
I know. I always thought being quartered could be fun.
Fuck, that's a word.
Is it fantasy or is it bacteria? Welcome back to 4 Geeks by Geeks, the place where geeks come to geek out. As always, I am Boser.
I'm T.
Look, I have a buddy!
He does have a buddy. He was getting real sad without me. I was like, I guess I can come be on stream with him for a little bit.
Thanks for that moral support there. But thank you to everyone joining us live here on Twitch in the chat. We're doing this live on a Monday night at 8:30, just like we do every week. And grateful to have John here. We got Baff here. We got Alec here. And plenty more. Say hi as you pop in. Otherwise, if you're listening back on podcast or watching on YouTube, thank you for checking us out. Comment below. Say hello.
Man's completely ignored that we're also live on YouTube.
What? Yeah, because Twitch took away the no-no about streaming wherever you want.
Twitch finally realized, like, oh, we're going to keep losing content creators if we don't stop limiting them.
Oh, we should care about the users, not just about the paycheck.
All right, listen here. You're being anti-capitalist right now, and that's not going to go our way.
You're just rubbing off on me. It only
the
took
biggest compliment I've ever received is I'm the biggest non-conformist somebody has ever met, and that's been stuck in with me for like 10 years now, and I'm like, yes.
The biggest non-conformist? I'm trying to think if I've known anybody else. Yeah, but I've known some people that are like non-conformist for the sake of being a non-conformist. I think you actually believe what you're not.
Oh yeah, I just call out bad ideas. This was for this high-end chef I worked with in Tennessee. Like anytime he's like, "Oh, we're gonna do this," I'm like, "No, that's a terrible idea."
But you're not a yes man. That's good.
I'm not. I'm a no but man.
I'm not having this conversation with you again. Not here. I'm not in the mood. Comment yes and below.
Or no but. Which do you prefer?
Yeah, we'll find out. But if this is your first Geek Out Sesh, we do this each and every Monday with a brand new geek guest and really let them geek out about what they're into, their content, their art, their fandoms. And tonight we get to hang out with a fantasy novelist, writer, world builder, long time. So stick around. And then towards the end of the stream, we're going to play a little game I like to call, Is It Fantasy or Is It Bacteria?
We're gonna have to come up with a better name by the end of the stream for that one.
What are you talking about?
It doesn't come. It's too much of a mouthful, but not in a good way. Like, you know how there's some words that just like fill your mouth. I'm like, this is pleasant. And then there's sometimes you're just like, oh, this is just a word vomit. And I think that's just a word vomit.
But that's what makes it so pleasant.
I don't think
it's non-conformist of a title. Yeah, you gonna argue with that? You gonna fight me now?
Yes, I will.
Why? Because he's a non-conformist.
The biggest you'll ever meet.
Hey, but speaking of world building and speaking of D&D, what a segue.
Great segue.
If you love your dice
segue.
And you want to give them a fun place to live and play, check out Minstrel. Mine's backwards and yours is not.
I can Vanna White mine and not look like a fool.
I can't. Minstrel is a Polish organization making beautiful dice accessories, dice boxes, dice bags, dice trays.
That's all the items. I got nothing else to Vanna White.
We'll get more. They locally source all of their materials. Ooh, I like this. Magical or microorganism?
John found it.
Of course he did. He's so good at this. But if you are in the mood and for needing a new one of those kinds of things, use Command Dice.
Nope. Command Minstrel.
Command Minstrel. Or check out the link below if you're watching back. Because we are an affiliate, we get a little piece of that pie every time you use it. So it helps support the stream in just a little tiny way. Thank you.
Do you want to announce the big news that we had this week?
What's the... Oh! I was like, what's the big news? No, you go ahead.
We finally hit 1K subscribers on YouTube.
Yeah!
We are this close away from monetization. We need you to watch 900 more hours of YouTube, please. Our YouTube specifically.
You know what? If each subscriber just watched 1 more hour,
honestly, that's all it is. We just need each 1,000 of you, each one of you, just 1 hour of your time, please and thank you.
Just
watch this tomorrow, and we'll be where we need to be.
Yeah, but we're getting there. I think we can hit it. It's one of those things that I've just like set and forget and like wasn't even thinking about, and then, then I just noticed. I thought you texted me, but wait, did you text me or did I text you?
No, you text me.
Hey.
The last I looked, we were a good chunk away, so I don't know where they came from, but I'm not mad at it.
They came from the beautiful communities of our Geek guests. Much like our Geek guest tonight. I'm ready to jump in this. I want to know more about the...
Will stream labels tell us who they were?
Will what?
Stream labels.
Oh, yeah, probably.
Well, I have to restart this session, so probably not. Anyways, not important.
Anyway.
We can go about to why we're actually here.
We're here to hang out with a really cool writer who we had a conversation with on Instagram, but the more I talked to them and the more I spread the word about tonight's Geek Out Sesh, turns out that we've got many of the same friends. Team Drew's Basement buddies and 225 Games and Heroes of Evermore and so many that we're meeting in this amazing D&D space. So we're going to add him to our little collection. And I would like to introduce you to the very talented. Give out some love in the chat. Let me see some emojis. And let's hear it for Andrew Zimba.
Hey, everybody. Hey, T and Boser. How y'all doing?
We can do better than that. We can do better than that. How about
I was trying to segue you into the cheers and the applause.
Those are all of our subscribers, our 1,000.
Yep, they all came here just to applaud you.
Yeah. Oh, glad to be here.
We appreciate you coming on.
How you feeling tonight?
Good. Hope everybody's doing well in chat. And Monday night, here we are.
Monday night, baby. Speaking of chat, one thing that we forgot to mention is use the command QOTD for the question of the day. Since we are living in the medieval era in tonight's discussion, I want to know, how would you want to meet your end in medieval times? How would you want to go?
This is such an aggressive question. This is probably the most aggressive question of the day we've ever had.
I know. I was thinking of like the regular questions, and I was like, okay, so how do I crank that up to 11? Oh, that's good.
How do we scar this new guy?
Yeah. Bath says beheading. Okay.
Yeah,
I mean, that is the quickest and easiest way. And I mean, if we're being honest, the medieval killings were just absolutely brutal. I think mine would be keel heating because I feel like that would be the least worst way to die.
What even is that?
So keel heating is when a sailor would be killed by being dragged behind the mast of the ship. So you either died from drowning or severe head trauma by beating your head against the boat as you got dragged behind it.
Oh, geez, they're being like drug across the coral reef.
Because I mean, we're talking that period. We're talking about eaten by rats. The whatever it was called when they filled you with liquid gold and killed you from the inside out. We're talking about the golden eagle or the bloody eagle. We're talking about the fucking bowl. There's so many.
I am today years old when I found out that T has an intimate knowledge with killing in the medieval era.
I'm going to be honest with you, but I've got a mug that says I'm not a serial or something along the lines of like, ignore my Google search history. I'm not a serial killer. I'm a writer. Because I've written about all of these terribly fucked up things in a project of some kind over the years.
Bath just outed you. It's your kink.
Don't kink shame me.
We knew it. I like John's. I'd go out with old age. So like by 55.
I mean, honestly, it's not too far off. That might actually be old. That it would definitely be old age. Let's be honest here.
Yeah, for sure. I think most people died of like their teeth. Something going wrong with
everybody
their teeth.
out here getting scurvy.
Yeah.
I always thought being quartered could be fun.
Fuck, that's a word.
Because, like, are the horses going to go at the exact same time, the exact same pressure? Like, going to be
No, of course
quartered?
not. No. There's no way you can there's no way you could time and mathematically. Maybe in today's age you could rig something up, but horses do what they please when they please. You are not getting 4 courses to Kia all at the same time.
Yeah. What about you, Andrew? How would you go?
Well, I was going to say in the quartering, then you could have something where maybe your character somehow escapes, right? Maybe some of the ropes are frayed. And one horse is a little bit slower, but some other get on one of the horses and get out of there. So
'tis but a flesh wound. You just lose one limb out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess you'd have to get them all loose. That would be
Or they all just run in the same direction.
Convince the horses all to flee in one direction. Yes, that's the solution.
Yeah. But also, what's the dramatic moment? What's the escape trick? Maybe there isn't. There, you're probably pretty penned in.
Oh yeah, no, there is no escape. I think they had one guy escape at one point in time. Like, absolutely not. This isn't happening again.
Now, if the rope broke, did they just rehang you, or did they say, "Well, that was fate"? And
see, that's a very viable question because small segue. I've gotten way too deep into Final Fantasy 14 as of late, and in like one of the segments, it's like they bring up like you're being charged for a crime. I duel to the death, like trial by champion. I'm like, it blows my mind that at one point in time, the world was so entrenched that God was so right all the time that you could go mass murder people, but if you were a good enough fighter, you were getting exonerated from all of those crimes because you won a duel. And I think that is just the wildest thing about history, is that no, I just fuck bitches up better than other people do, so I can do whatever I please with no punishment.
Yeah, it's like might is right.
So I think I took mine in a totally different way. I would have said, because we're going to be talking about epic fantasy as we go here, I would say in a dramatic last stand, either defending a pass like Thermopylae or defending a castle. Like, high time for everybody else to save themselves, get ready for what's coming.
Respectable.
If I had to pick out of all those things, torture methods or what is the significance of how I'm going out, I would pick something like that.
There really was no reason we should have went the torture route, because the question really was open-ended enough where he is right. Like, we could have gone down as heroes. We're like, no, we did something wrong and deserve this. What do we pick?
Yeah. Or Kate showing again.
That's it's good world building though, right? It's not only one thing. It's like, what else could it be?
Exactly.
That's perfect. Yeah.
Yes, and or no, but the much better.
Yes.
Anyway, before we get too deep into this great talk, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do as a geek.
Medieval fantasy is my main thing. Medieval fantasy writer, but I also play D&D. I like fantasy, myth and magic, history, kind of all that put together with creating worlds. So I would say world building. In addition to writing, I've taken the lessons that I learned along the way. So on Instagram, I share world building tips, writing tips to try to distill my multi-year process of figuring things out, try to help other people as well with. And it's not like there's a right or wrong answer. It's like, these are suggestions. Here are things that work for me. Here's something you could try. But totally believe in people should build the world that they want, tell the story that they want, and then just, bounce ideas off of other people and see find what works for you.
So when you play D&D, what kind of character do you like to play? Or are you the GM?
I go back and forth. I start. My first character was a barbarian, half-orc barbarian, which ties into the book. And then I made a ranger, clerics.
Fucking rangers, the worst.
Mechanically, yes. Yeah, mechanically, yes. But
why are they so bad? I'm not the
because
veteran.
Outside of favored terrain and favored enemy, they are absolutely useless. They have fantastic flavor text, like as we've seen in cinema over the years, but mechanically speaking, they are absolutely dog shit outside of their favored locations. Because you got to think, like, the biggest running joke is like, yes, the wizard's going to cast Wish at level 9. What's the ranger going to do? I shoot an arrow. Oh, I shoot another arrow. Haha, guess what? Another arrow. That's all they've got in their quiver, pun intended.
Yeah. True.
Somebody in the chat fight him, or in the comments. There's got to be somebody out there that min-maxes a ranger.
Justice will try, and he knows just all well that it's the worst by far.
So, Andrew, is that how you first got your start when this like desire to world build and storytelling? Was it TTRPGs?
No, actually, I came to D&D very, very late, like 2014. Like kids, I don't know if I was even maybe barely aware of it as a kid. Like we played Monopoly and Risk.
Really? Same. No one played cool games like that in my house growing up.
Yeah, nobody played those growing up unless you were a legit geek that got beat up on the schoolyard, bud. This did not become cool until about 10 years ago.
Right.
So yeah, like just starting as a kid, like reading books, history and mythology, as I mentioned, but world building, that was the question, right, guys? Did I forget the question? Are we talking about world building?
Yeah, just like how did you get
here?
To start? Yeah.
I'm just thinking,
you start into all this?
Probably where I first started like designing things and thinking about it was, and again, I come from the land of dial-up internet, which was playing Warcraft 2, where a buddy of mine, he was like, I wouldn't consider myself a gamer. I would play it. I liked it, but he would beat me every time we played head to head. And then they came out with like the expansion pack where you could build worlds. And I said, I think we can play together. Why don't we play on the same team?
Well, so I gotta look up what Warcraft is. Give me a second.
Like World of Warcraft?
Like Warcraft.
I thought the same thing too. That's not
Warcraft
it. Completely separate things.
Okay, now I'm gonna look it up too.
Yeah.
Warcraft 2. See, I'm thinking of like StarCraft.
I'm dating myself here, but if anybody out there remembers dial-up internet, remembers Warcraft 2.
My buddies played this. I never played this.
But it was, I thought, because when they had the world building like app in there, I said, we've kind of played through all the scenarios. Let me build something. So what's the biggest map I can make? Let's make something where we're on the same team, because he would beat me regardless of how I set it up. And then put in all the other factions. And it's probably the first time I started to pay attention to what, like consciously, like what is the rate and pace of this game? How do I make it where it's not an easy walkthrough, and it's also like it's impossible to win, but there's like ebbs and flows where there might be orcs you got to fight right up front, and then the computer is taking a little bit of time with whatever you give it to start with to kind of get going to producing things.
Yeah,
and that's where the first time I started to think about how do you create something. It wasn't my game, but like in that world builder module, how do you create something that creates the excitement for me and also for my buddy who were playing, and keep the game going, where it's not just a quick thing. Like you keep the drama, you keep the pacing throughout it. And then with my love of history, like Civilization 2, again, I think we're on 6, maybe 7 now.
6 currently, 7 is in development.
Okay. So 2 came out, and they came out with the multiplayer expansion pack gold edition. And it was like, wow, I can build worlds here and play games. And even through like Civ 4, having like 8 different people playing at different times, like you could email the file back and forth in Civ 4. So you might play like 2 turns a week or something like that if you were lucky, if people didn't forget where the file was. So there'd be like half of it would be the file going around, and other half of who has the file, who's sitting on it, what's going on, like let's keep this moving. So there was this other thread with that. But it was setting up worlds where it taught me a couple things. One, like if you give players armies and cities, like they're going to use it, right? That sounds kind of counterintuitive, but I was like, well, I'm going to leave a few units over here so you can defend over here and you can defend here. And they were like, I'm taking everything I have and I'm attacking the person who's right next to me. I'm not worried about this other stuff. I'm going right here. So it's like, if you give a side an advantage, they're going to try to use it. And like, they're not going to try to, let's just sit around. They're going to try to win the game. It's like, oh, okay. You really mean you're going to try to win the game? Like for me, it was setting it up, was just something that it took me a little while to realize. If you give this person, and then like in writing the novel as well. If you give these characters certain things, they may not do the perfect thing, but they're going to try to win. They're going to try to obtain their goals. And then also with building and like civilization, you can actually see history unfold. Like if you play a game long enough, and if there were sometimes we play for a while, you see like your starting point, but what happens to these empires or these countries, and less about like what the players do, but what your starting conditions are. If you just let the game run, what I think is like close, well, actually there's like a little bit of an advantage. And if you have it at turn 1, by turn 100, it's like it's massive. And my friends were very patient with me because they would say like, I'm about 10 technologies behind and I like to play like a science-based thing. Did you mean to do this to me? I'm like, no, I'm sorry. I'm still learning and calibrating all of this.
I'm just building a story in my head. You guys are actually fighting me.
Yeah. It was like, okay, because I think that's what I was trying to say. I have a preconceived idea of what these players are going to do with these things. And then they do something totally different. But the point is, if you give them this, you have all bets are off at that point. You have no idea how they're going to approach it, which is part of the fun too. But it's also in game design or in writing. Part of it for me with writing is this has to be a real place, and people have to be trying to win or trying to further their goals, and not like I've got this great thing, but I'm going to save it to chapter 30 just because it maybe fits the dramatic arc. Now, if you have it, you should try to play your best cards up front. And then D&D was another piece as well that I came to, like I mentioned, 2014. Mm-hmm. Playing a little bit, DMing a little bit. Yeah, Rangers are weak. I agree with that. But also like learning about the game. The first time I DM'd, I think like the 3 people who were playing, I think I said just be level 10. I don't remember if it was because we were level 10 in another setting. I see you guys kind of like that's pretty high.
You just jump to level 10?
Yeah, like they're going to jump to level 10.
Okay.
And then they had like this, they had to infiltrate behind enemy lines. I think they had to meet up with like a local resistance group. So they had to go find this person and then kind of make their way out, I think is what it was. But at one point they had to cross this bridge and I had like 7 or 8 guards, just kind of typical guards. I thought that's probably enough for this party. But I didn't know what greater invisibility was. Oh, like this was not an encounter at all. And which is okay. Like in D&D, there should be some that are very, very easy. Yep. And some that are very, very hard. Like I don't think it should always be adjusted, right? But it got me thinking, like, if this was like a real place, so this was a setting, like how many people know greater invisibility? Would this be used as like a battlefield tactic? Would you have a unit of like 1,000 soldiers for greater invisibility, or assassins who use this all the time? So it got me thinking just about like I think D&D is a great laboratory for world building because you can test stuff out. And then it's like, how do I, if I write my own story, I wanted to write historical fiction.
Okay.
For a long time. So for me, it was like historical accuracy, authenticity. But part of that was research. And then also like I wanted to write for a long time. But I think at one point I realized you already know this story. You love history, you love reading it, but you're just inserting new characters into a story that's already been told.
With
like
historical fiction.
Sorry, say again?
With historical fiction.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, with historical fiction, yeah. And it just didn't captivate me enough to want to sit down and write that. Mm-hmm. Especially if you're following armies, there's these huge lags in time. And I didn't think like, well, chapter 1, and then you jump 2 months and you jump 3 months, but these characters have to be with the history. So it was just hard for me to keep it. Like, how do I keep it fresh without these random time jumps?
Right. It's like almost limiting because you have to stick with the history, but also like you aren't able to express your creativity fully because you're sticking to something that already exists.
Yeah. I think a lot of writers then use like side quests, if you want to use that term for historical fiction. But
yeah,
the main character becomes a spy, where they have to go on this this mission in between the historical parts. And I was like, other writers do that. I wanted to do something different, but I couldn't figure it out. So I had this many years of wanting to write a book, and it would kind of ebb and flow over time. But, are you serious about this? Or, life, other things are happening in life and that kind of thing. But it was wanting to write a book. It was D&D and just like, hey, this is real-time world building. This is storytelling. Like it's not that hard to get into this.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then Game of Thrones came out, the TV show,
Mm-hmm.
which solved for me, because when I was writing historical fiction, it was, here's a main character. I'm going to follow this character and the people like immediately around that character. But Game of Thrones is like, you can be over here and then jump to the next dramatic moment. And then if these people are traveling, you can come back to them later. Like that was such an eye opener. So then going back to these two D&D characters, they weren't really from anywhere. They didn't have any backstory. They were basically a stat sheet. And I thought, okay, well, how did these two meet? And they probably don't know each other. So how did they meet? They would have met in an army. And this was kind of the jumping off point of, okay, I'm going to start with a blank piece of paper. I'm not going to rely upon the historical stuff. I'm going to start with a blank piece of paper. And how do they know each other? They probably don't. If they were to meet, they would meet in an army. Okay, so what happened with this army? They lost the battle. Not only did they lose, but part of that army switched sides. So you got this betrayal, this treason, and this army is now destroyed, routed, captured. And the two main characters flee back to this forest. And that was the initial idea. That's all I had when I started. So thanks. Sorry, that was too long of an answer, but
No, I'm just trying to track that. I love that you always wanted to write a book, but even before you started writing it, like you were carving out your creative process and using like game thinking and the Game of Thrones to help you kind of navigate your own style. So that's really interesting. So from the moment that you thought, I'm going to write a book, to the moment that you actually completed the book, what was that time span?
20 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And again, it wasn't where I was thinking like, I have to write this now.
Yeah.
It was like, it would be cool to write this. And there would be parts where it would be more like, you're researching, I'm writing, but I couldn't get past a few chapters. I was kind of got stuck, and then I would begin again and put it to the side and come back. But yeah, it was. So if there's people out there who are thinking about creating whatever you're doing, and it's like, yeah, but so much time has passed, but you're learning, you're gaining new things. And I couldn't have written this book, 10 years ago or 20 years ago.
Right.
Because I've got more perspective. I've lived more. I've learned more. Like it all goes into it. So I would say if people are thinking about it, if you're frustrated, I've been there. It's like, why isn't this working? I don't like this story. I think I want to write this. What's wrong? Sometimes you got to find something different or just kind of shift a little bit, but not to be hard on yourself. Being hard on yourself doesn't help.
And that's such an important thing that people don't recognize, because you have guys like Stephen King who puts out, I think mathematically it was like 9 to 12 books a year, because when he sits down, he plans on writing like 5 pages a day. And whether he is writing his novelettes or these fucking grandiose things he is writing, it's because he dedicates his life, and he knows the stories he's done because he's found his voice however long ago. And then you have guys in contrast to him, like George R.R. Martin, who sat down and talked with him. Like, he's like, how are you doing this to this speed? Like, how are you cranking out these books? And so a lot of people are like you said, like, you can't beat yourself up for not putting this out because of this timetable. It can take you 20 years, and there's nothing wrong with that, because you don't know what story you're trying to tell until you're trying to do it. And yeah, sometimes you have this inkling of an idea now, and if you try to write it down, you're like, oh, this isn't working. It's because you don't know what you're trying to tell yet. You know you want to tell this story, but you don't know how to tell it. And there's nothing wrong with that. You may just not have the perspective you need now to get to the point where telling this tale, this story that you want to unfold is going to have the basically the legs to carry it, because it's just not there yet. And there's nothing wrong with that. Take as long as you need, as long as the story you want to tell and you're happy with it. It can be done in a week. It can be done in 10 years. Just be happy with the progress that you've done, period.
Yeah, most definitely. And you got to run your own race. I mean, more power to those people who can write the books incredibly fast. And sometimes it just takes more like marinating time. Like I'll read stuff that I've written a few months ago. Like, it's close, but it needs a little extra, or this has to be moved, or that has to be moved. So you just got to run your own race and more power to Stephen King and others who can write that fast. Certainly, like, that's awesome. But you got to do your own thing.
And the quote comes to mind: "Don't compare your beginning to somebody else's middle or somebody else's end."
Yeah.
Like Stephen King has been writing for such a long time, and he's gone through everything that you're going through or have gone through or any budding writer has gone through. He just did it a long time ago and was able to navigate that. And so now so much further. But if you don't start because you're afraid of getting it wrong, then you're never going to get to that point at all.
Fail, but fail upwards.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's some quote like, I don't want to go get a degree or something like that, because in that time I'll be, this age, but you're going to be that age
anyways.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you want to, it's like, don't give your power away. Like, however you want to use it, however you want to spend your time, but do it in a way that's like, this is what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Like, whatever that is, versus like, well, I'm comparing myself to somebody else. Yeah.
So hit us. Sorry, go ahead.
But you're good.
I just wanted to, if you could give us like the Cliff Notes version of what your book's about, or hit us with that elevator speech about what In Times of War, A Tale of Ardalencor is about, and give people a reason that they might want to use command book or get the caption below and pick it up for just 99 cents right now.
Yeah, I was running a sale through the end of October, but I knew I was coming on. Boser, thank you for getting this lined up. And it'll be open through today. So tomorrow, let's say through tomorrow as well. 99 cents for the ebook on Kindle. So thank you for putting the link in the chat. But the story, we'll talk about world building and those kind of things. But first and foremost, it's about relationships. It's about friendship. It's about family. It's in these extreme circumstances. How do people show up when the chips are down? Do they take care of the people next to them, or are they only out for themselves? Like, that's one of the main threads that goes throughout the book. As I was mentioned, the country of Ardalencor has been invaded. This is like the backdrop just before the book starts. Okay. They've been invaded. There's been a major battle. They've lost. Part of the Ardalen army has switched sides. So now you've got a rebellion going on. You've got an invasion. And it's a multi-point of view story where you start with Bambenek and Dronor, who are D&D-ish, but they weren't. But I had to come up with their backstory, like where they were from, was all grounded in this new world I was creating, and I wanted them to be of the world. So you meet them, you meet other people. It's like rank and file soldiers, where nobody's coming to save them. Like, they've got to figure out what the hell happened. What do we do next? Who can we trust? Like, we can't stay in this forest forever. So where do we go? And if we encounter somebody who, like, a few days ago would have been our friend, or we thought they were our friend, like, who are we going to walk into now? So that's part of it. And like the next chapter is you meet the rebels, the traitors. Things have gone very well for them after this battle, but they've got an alliance with this invading country, and they're trying to manipulate them too. Like, they're not necessarily buddies. They're trying to use each other.
Sure.
And the rebels are like, we're going to use this crisis, this invasion, to discredit the High Lord. That's like the king, the High Lord Adolin. We're going to discredit him. We're going to seize power, and basically the country will be stronger because we're in charge. Like the main character, Padazar. I will be a stronger ruler, but I have to use this crisis to gain control, because he's not strong enough. Like, if he just said, I'm declaring a rebellion, the rest of the country would be like, what's going on? But he's using these broader circumstances. And then a little bit later, you hear from the High Lord. He's lost 80 or 90% of his army. It's like, what do you do next? So he's got to think, do I try to make a stand in a nearby fortress? Do I retreat, try to live and fight another day? How do I keep people on my side? Because it's one thing if you have to say you're the boss, you're probably not the boss. But to be in charge, especially of like a country or a major organization, you need people to say, yes, I support you.
Yeah.
Right. So there's these other subtexts of, how does he remain in control? Are there other people who are still loyal to him? They say it's right to continue to back him, or do we have to make a shift? So fundamentally, it's this friendship, relationships, family, but then there's all these other levels of action sequences, battles, politics, intrigue. Magic is in there as well. And so there's multiple threads, multiple storylines. Some resolve in the first book. Others you may say, yeah, this one's probably I'm working on book 2 now. These other things may wrap up in book 2. And then there's some other things that are just, there's a sentence here, a sentence there that is going to feed into something longer term. So for me, I wanted the challenge of writing this very immersive world. It's all told through the characters, but I wanted it to be like, this is a real place. So if I'm going to put something into this world, it has to fit. And it's like if you vibrate like one part of the spider web, like everything else is probably going to vibrate too. So if you put something in, how does it impact everything else?
Okay, so let me ask you about that world.
Yeah.
Because you said when you first started with those 2 characters, you didn't have a backstory for them, but you wanted to build that backstory based on the rest of the world. So when it just comes to building Ardalencor, like where did you start? What sort of things are important in your process?
Yeah, I first started with, okay, who are these factions? And like the invading army was part of it, but I was like, that can always be like this external force. It's like, what's going on within this country? So who are these rebels? What are the characters that are within this group? Who's part of this royal faction? And some of it is just like, what's a typical medieval analog, right? So there's going to be generals and there's these different kinds of positions and there's religious leaders. So there'd be kind of like these placeholders. So
you kind of base that off of actual medieval, like historical.
Yeah, that was always kind of like, so if you're world building and not sure where to go, something inspired you to world build. So it's like, I often think of world building as it's a puzzle. You don't have the top of the box. You don't have the edge pieces. And most of the pieces are blank till you actually look at it and say, okay, how am I going to fit this somewhere? But something inspired you to do it. So it's like, until you figure out whatever you're trying to figure out, just say, oh, I'm going to default to medieval Japan or whatever a game or movie. It's like, until I know this is what I'm going to use. So some of it was like the society should have like these certain elements. Sometimes it can be like, whoa, I'm looking at a blank page. I'm not sure where to go. It's like, I know I need something, but what actually is it? And part of that is just time and patience, trial and error, trying different things.
So then you built the story mostly around the relationship first, and then you just let the world kind of blossom from there? Or did you already have like basically the rough picture of that puzzle in your mind of what you knew you wanted it to be, and then place the characters within it?
I didn't know anything other than there was this battle that was lost. There's these 2 characters that I want to start the story with in the forest.
You didn't know why they're fighting. You didn't know what they're fighting about.
Right. Yeah. I mean, all that came, right? All that got built out. And, where is this forest relatively in this country, and where are these certain things? So part of it was I would write kind of a fragment of it, but I would also have to stop. I think there's a difference between like the world building and then the actual story you tell within it. So I'd have to stop and say, okay, what's the geographic location of all of it? I started with just drawing, scribbling the map. And then it's like, well, no, I got to change this. That became untenable.
Wow, he started with a map, T. Isn't that weird? we have yet to have a map for the campaign we're doing now.
That's okay. That's okay. I needed it for myself, like to keep track of, because part of the interwoven storylines was these forces are going to be pushing against each other. And then they're going to be traveling. So how close? It's not so much that there's distances listed in the book. There's some, but not a lot. But it's just for me, like this chapter should come after this chapter. Right. And this thing should happen before this. That was for me to keep track of where things were going. But building that, and then, okay, here are the groups, and then the heraldry, the culture, all those things got layered on as time went on. But the big thing for me was, I would say, is look for what are the disruptive elements in the story that you want to include. So I think there's a difference between setting your world up, like all of the ingredients, and setting your world in motion, which means now that I've picked these things, Like, how do they all interact? Because if it's a world building, like there's a history, there's a current state, and there's kind of a trajectory to this world as well. So that was kind of what I was thinking about, like with magic, how would this work? Like, how many people have this? How powerful is it? Are there any checks or balances on using magic? All of that was just kind of trial, error, tinkering. I tried to limit it. I think that was probably, if everybody has magic, and it's like, how do I actually write with all these variables to it?
Mm-hmm.
So I limited it to a few characters or a few groups, and it just became easier to manage.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so part of it is like, how much do you want to, bite off or tackle with building your world? And I think it's all depends on what kind of story do you want to tell, right? Build your own world, tell the story you want to tell, and like, how much do you need to go about doing that?
Which is very important to emphasize. It's kind of coming back to Boser's point, like, oh, he has a map, which again blatantly falls into the what story am I telling? And as you kind of stated, because you have these competing forces in various parts of the world, you need to know what is happening when your character is going to be not even necessarily like near it, but like in the vicinity, because you got to consider word of mouth. What is like fauna and flora going to be doing to their actions? Because these are going to be like minor things that are going to make these things come to life as like for the reader to understand, like, oh, I'm in this story, I'm experiencing this, because it's the little nuances you have to pay attention to, that even though, like you said, you pluck one strand of a spider web, the rest is going to reverberate. As compared to you, Boser, like, oh, we don't have a map. We're not telling a story that requires a map, because it's a collaborative story that we're just yes-anding all the way around, trying to continue on this little thread. But when it comes to no budding, correct, good job. But when it comes to something like a novelization, which is going to be something a lot more finite and not as obscure in the sense of what you're capable of doing, you have to have not a linear path that you're going, because obviously that nobody likes linear stories. You want your branches and everything, but you have to understand, even if it's not directly happening to the characters, what's happening around them and why, because that's the only way you're going to make these things feel real, and the only way you're actually going to be able to enjoy that as a reader. Because otherwise, like, oh, I'm just reading these overpowered characters doing whatever the hell they want. Nothing bad happens to them because nothing can like impact them. And you want these things to feel real. You want that draw in. You want to know your characters are mortal. You want to know actions have consequences. You want to see them bleed, because nobody enjoys a hero's tale where they don't climb a mountain. If you're at the peak and you're just descending down the other side, that's not entertaining.
There's no conflict.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The conflict.
You got it.
Drama aside, everyone's like, oh, I don't like drama. No, you fucking love drama. You don't like drama that's happening to you. If we're not getting conflict, we're not happy about what is happening in this story.
Right.
Yeah, there's got to be consequences if you're going to have victory. If it's easily obtained, then it's not as sweet, right? It's not
exactly.
So I'm curious, because now you were working on this book for 20 years, and
well, not this one. I mean, this was probably more 5, but the idea of writing a book
sure,
was out there for about 20. But
okay,
still a long horizon for sure. Yes,
this is your first book, right?
This is my first book. Yeah.
So the idea of writing a book for 20 years, but then you actually began putting your nose to the grindstone or the typewriter, and that was like 5 to 7, you said?
Yeah, but about 5 years from the initial idea of this book. But yeah, just the idea of wanting to write a book for much longer. But about 5 years and working on this one. Yeah, because
it's clear that you have a much stronger grasp about storytelling and world building than maybe you did 20 years ago. And T has he's almost that same story. He's wanted to write a book and wanted to write a screenplay, and you have so many ideas that like you're both still crafting what storytelling is. How did you come to this knowledge of like what's working? Like really, how did you fail in the previous years that gained you that perspective that now you have a better understanding of what works for you?
Yeah, part of it was, world building in civilization, where you've got, 3, 4, 5, up to, I think we had 8 people at one point playing.
Yeah.
it's like here, and it's within the parameters of this algorithm of the game. But you see, like, if you give a certain amount of resources to somebody, they're going to be much stronger later on than somebody who doesn't have that.
Right.
And you're going to see there's people who are going to be aggressive in their play. So it's like, why wouldn't you expect that from somebody who's engaged in a rebellion? They got to get this thing over as quickly as possible, right? They want to rule this country, not just destroy it. So they have to be aggressive all the time. So these are just little lessons that I would learn.
Yeah.
The way D&D was interesting too. It's like, how would this magic actually work? Like we often think about with D&D, that there's such a focus on the characters, which makes sense, right? It's a game. It's for the players. People want to have fun, enjoy. There's different styles of play, but you play because you enjoy the game. But if you think about it, as T was mentioning, what's the context of this world more broadly, right? And how do things, less about the character, but if you think about it like in the other way. So like an example I like to talk about is St. George fighting the dragon. Like that's iconic, hero's tale, good versus evil. The dragon slayer kills the dragon. And the imagery of that is like this close encounter. Like thematically, it's this close encounter of evil. Like it's St. George on his horse, the dragon, and he's either about to stab or has stabbed the dragon with his lance. Like you're coming face to face with your nemesis and you're winning. And that's campfire storytelling. That's like the foundation of storytelling. But then there's the other piece of it. If you think about it as a world where if this dragon can fly and breathe fire, why did that dragon ever get so close? If the knight was charging him, why didn't he just lift off 10 feet and roast him?
Right.
So it's kind of this corollary of, well, how would this actually work? How does my dragon be its best dragon? How do I take these parts to like, here are the ingredients I want to use? And is it just the dragon is there as a pincushion? I mean, that's in an allegorical tale. It's like the dragon is there because of what it represents. And I'm telling you the story about courage, about facing obstacles, about overcoming. And that's incredibly powerful. We cannot lose that in storytelling. That's what storytelling is. But the allegory is less concerned about why is there only one dragon or this or that. I'm not sure in this specific story if it could breathe fire or how well it could fly. But it's like, but if you think about D&D, right? Those dragons are hyper intelligent, and they've got a breath weapon. They've got skills. They can fly. Okay, if I'm going to put one of those dragons in my story, how does that dragon be its best dragon? And you can dial that up or dial that down depending on the story you want to tell. But for me, it was like, okay, if I'm putting these things on the board, I don't use dragons in the story. I have a reference to them, but there are a lot of very famous stories at the time about dragons. I'm like, that's not really what this story is about. But I took dragons as, in my view, it's an existential threat. So dragons do show up. This is like in the lore. It's like 2 or 3 sentences because I wanted just the imagery of dragons because it's so powerful. But basically, these dragons, this is a few lines of lore and backstory, but they show up, but they're deemed an existential threat, and they got to take care of them. They got to wipe them out. So the Ardalens, the magic users, are also dragon slayers as well. But it's like, take this dragon, and all other things being equal, if it's just a knight with a lance, that might not be an effective way to get this dragon. And especially if it's super intelligent, now we got to be thinking about, okay, how do we outthink this dragon, or what else is happening? Like these questions are more about, tell me more, let's figure this out. It's not like we can't do this, because when somebody says, hey, I got a few questions for you, it's like, oh great, where is this going to go? But when it's world building, it's like, we've got to explore this world. Tell me more about it. How do we figure this out? What can this dragon do? And then as T was mentioning, it's like, how do you ramp up the stakes? Because it's like, you can't charge this dragon that's suicidal. Don't do it. And maybe it comes down to that later. But you kind of build this up and you get your best dragon and then you put your best hero or collection of heroes. I think that becomes a richer story. And then you also think about your world. Like that worked for me. Doing things like that, little thought exercises. Like I'm going to pick these things.
So then let's circle back.
Yeah.
I guess my original question was, what failures taught you how to become the writer you are? And what I heard was you just paid attention and like games and really use those as a starting point and ask the questions that the games aren't asking.
Yeah, that's fair. Like basically where I thought things went off track or what I designed, and then when somebody went off a cliff, I'm like, oh, I didn't mean for that to happen. And then also like being a DM, and it's like, oh, I thought this was balanced or would be a challenge and it wasn't. Why was that? Yeah.
Okay. I love that gaming is like the core source material. But you didn't consider yourself a gamer, and yet you're a writer.
I wouldn't put myself up as like an elite player by any means, not even near that. But it taught me a lot, and also like history, like you see historical trends through things as well. Like if these people are doing well, they can probably continue to do well until something else happens. You see like these advantages grow with technology over time as well. So it was a combination of things. But
so why live in this medieval era? Is it just from like D&D that you find so fascinating, or like you started by trying to write a historical fiction book? Was it always going to land in that era?
The book was going to be a little bit later. It would be more like Renaissance or late Renaissance.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it was just kind of returning to my roots. Like a lot of the first things that I started reading were knights and castles and those kinds of books, medieval books. And then obviously with the D&D connection, it's kind of the generic medieval fantasy realm. So it's something I'm familiar with. And it was,
Do you it's plan also just a very easy thing to write in, because like one of my personal favorite forms of media is modern magic, because I just love the idea of seeing like, how would magic interact with technology. And it's one of those things, there's too many but what ifs. Like when I write, the biggest thing like I do to like think of those plot holes is like, if somebody was trying to like discredit my work here, like what questions are they going to ask me? Like, what about? And when you have magic and you have technology, there's too many what abouts that they conflict so heavily. Obviously there's ways you can work around, but there's too many grandiose issues of them conflicting. So when I do those types of stories, I immediately go back to that medieval time, because it completely removes that error or that issue of, this immediately interacts with them. Like, well, I don't want to answer that question, so we're just going to pluck that shit and throw it right out of here, because I don't want to answer that question because I don't have an answer to that question. And medieval just opens up so many realms of what you're capable of doing, because there's so many facets you can pull from. Even if you don't go from like a historical aspect, if you go from like a lore aspect or just even like cultural history, there's so much you can take from just different fairy tales that really only can exist in that landscape to play in.
Yeah.
Do you plan to always write in that era, or are your next future books 20 years from now?
I think I'll stay here at least for the not at the Stephen King speed of writing, but working on book 2. Maybe this is 3, 4, 5, maybe. Just thinking about how things progress, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But we'll stay here for now. I'm enjoying it.
Okay.
Yeah.
In the world building aspect, I tell all of my writer friends about this. Do you know the app Obsidian?
I don't.
Highly recommend you looking it up. It's something that I got into world building because I like the visual progression. And so what Obsidian does is you can link aspects of your details as you're writing together. So you just create hyperlinks that connects everything together, and then it creates this entire web of interconnection. And that's so it's so much fun to like start writing on your characters, working on your backstories and your locations and how they all intertwine together. And then at the end of it, you truly see this entire outline of like, this is my entire world, from a top-down cosmos view of how everything intertwines together.
It stresses me out.
Adore it. I love it so much.
Every so often, he'll take a screenshot of it and share it with the group, and it's just like, I can't even connect anymore. It stresses me out.
like I said, I have the attention span of a squirrel, so I need those hyperlinks. I'm like, did I write about this before? So I'm like, all right, so I wrote about this. This is the backstory in detail I've listed out for this idea. Because otherwise, I'm like, I'm a very grandiose individual. Like, I love big ideas and I love the world building aspect. When it comes to the meticulous stuff, I get so hyper focused on making sure I have every little detail right now. So if I didn't use Obsidian, I have 9 notebooks on my desk at this moment in time, all with different pieces of the same project, and I can't do that anymore.
I think that sounds really helpful. I haven't heard of it, but that sounds super helpful. I think that's also the part of like world building being different from storytelling. And like you may have pages on a particular topic, but in the book, at least at this point, it's just a few lines. For me, it's also like, I need to know how this works.
Yep.
Is this magic item just a MacGuffin right now, or is like, okay, I got to stop. I got to figure out what this means. Yeah, so I can relate to that.
And I come from a theater aspect, and I've always told my students, like when they have a monologue or something, I make them do all this backstory, basically that world building for the character, because unless you really know where you're coming from and what's motivating you, then you're not going to be able to tell that story with any sort of truth or integrity or honesty. And even if no one else in the audience has a clue what's on your backstory, because you know it and why, if you mention something and you know how it works, whether it's like a magical item or what have you, the way that you handle it and have respect for it is going to be much different.
Yeah, agree.
It's just words on a page.
Yeah.
All connected, I think.
Yeah, I think like you said, that can help too with the performance of, why this character is acting this way. Mm-hmm. Or when this other character enters the stage, maybe they recoil a little bit or they smile, or there's something, it's minor, but the audience can pick it up. And it's like, this is why I need you to do this.
Yeah.
It's small, but it means a lot because it's going to build upon these other things. And you see that when you're enjoying this, like, oh, what was that? What's that about? And these little subtle moments are maybe a fraction of a second. But yeah, totally agree. Yeah.
And whether it's happening on stage or in the pages of a book. So then maybe you haven't heard of Obsidian, but how do you keep your notes organized in this massive world that you're building? What's your tips there?
I don't know if it's a tip, but I use Microsoft Word and Excel. That's kind of
Excel. Oh, okay.
That's the stuff that I use. Yeah, my
spreadsheets.
Spreadsheets, yeah, different tabs and different stuff. The first map I made was I just opened up Excel, made all the rows and columns the same size, and said each of these little squares is 5 by 5 miles, and I'm just going to start coloring and building because I had no idea what this looked like. I couldn't just do it on.
That's
on
cool.
Paper. Couldn't do it on paper, and I didn't want to be like, well, here's one mountain and there's another mountain, and like with some of the more fantastical map building software, I just need something crude. If I say this is too far away, like delete these rows and scrunch it together or expand it. So that worked for me. But
I adore hearing people's creative process. Never once have I looked at Excel and thought I can make a fucking world map on here.
It's a grid. That's a grid.
I mean, that's 100% what it is. It's
That's
honestly
awesome.
impressive to be able to turn that into something.
That was the prototype, and I was like, I don't know what this looks like, but there should probably be a capital over here, and this is over here, and
probably
move this around. But I don't have the hyperlink functionality, so that is great to get the bird's eye view. A lot of it comes down to me with just repetition, and just okay, how is this connected? How does this fit? And then, like you said, the myriad of notebooks and things, going back and finding where things are. So if there's easy ways to link that, then that's cool.
And it's just a very good way. And like we talked about, the nuances, the little things, really selling those things.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, we all know we've had those great ideas, but you don't know what notebook you put it in. And then you're like, okay, well, it's kind of like this, but maybe not entirely. And because you can't find it, you could potentially be missing out on what the best part of your book. And so when I started using the Obsidian just so I could have those little things, it's really helped a lot to be able to go back, because a lot of my ideas come like I'll create a scene in my head and I'll create entire stories based on like, oh, I'm telling this story because I want this scene to be experienced. This is the entire reason I'm doing this. But because I have so many of those on a constant basis, if I don't have that down somewhere that's a convenient place for me, because like I said, I've got 3 mini notebooks just within arm's reach. I guarantee within all of these, there's the same project being worked on in various pages and probably repeating itself. I'm like, oh, this is a really great idea. I should make sure I get this down. But I carried this one day, this one the next day, and this one 3 weeks later. Yeah. And it just turned into an issue. I'm like, which fucking one was it in there? But because I have 12 projects going and all of these, I don't know what idea correlates to what anymore. And it's just a mess of my thoughts looking like an absolute madman.
I can't believe you still are writing pen and ink with that kind of planning. Put it in a digital format.
See, I hate Apple Notes can't do it. Hate that shit. I will write it in and I will never look at it again.
I think the thing that helped me with I keep a notepad. Like if I write something down, I force myself. You have to transfer this to electronic very soon because I've lost too much stuff. My writing is chicken scratch a lot of times. If I'm trying to quickly get something done, I can't read it later. But I found that I'll think of something. Often it's like a line of dialogue or something as I'm about to go to sleep. And I think, well, if I just repeat it to myself I'm pretty comfortable. I don't want to get up. I'll just repeat it to myself 5 times or 10 times, and I'll definitely remember it tomorrow. But
does that work?
It doesn't work. Doesn't work. You remember half of it, which is almost more frustrating. So
it's the worst half every time.
Yes, and the pen and paper or something, just quickly jot it down. It cements the idea because I'm the same way. Like if I don't do it, I'll forget the idea by the time work comes. But the moment I have it out on paper, I've created it into a reality, and then my brain just immediately the next day I will remember it, even if I don't go back and look. But because I wrote it, it's locked in there. Yeah, muscle memory for sure. Yeah.
No, I agree with you there. I used to take notes in class, and I refused to type on a computer, like when you could have a laptop in college or whatever, but because that really cements it in my head. So I get for that reason, but just with all the crazy thoughts that I know you've got going on in all the different worlds that you're building, T, and you, Andrew, I can't imagine that pen and ink would suffice.
So T, how do all these
better than? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go.
Oh, I was just gonna say, pen and paper looks better than text face does.
True.
Which I say that, but then I'll go back and read my cursive. I'm like, I haven't the slightest fucking idea what these scribbles are fucking supposed. It's a fucking made up language some of the times. If I'm drunk and trying to dribble ideas, just fucking take it away. I'm just gonna punish myself in the future for it.
So T, when do all these stories coalesce?
So I've kind of changed over the years. Growing up, I was a poet because it was something my dad did, and obviously I wanted to be like my father. And then it kind of turned into poetry. I hate rhyme schemes, so I kind of gave up on that, and then pivoted into like novelization. So I've got a couple of those. But then my issue was I can't write fight scenes to save my life. Absolutely, it's not something I've ever been able to do. And so the older I got, and as much as I'll still write my scripts, so I've got sitcoms and various things like that. A lot of my writing has turned into strictly tabletop games. I just absolutely adore collaborative storytelling, and I'm proud of the ideas that I come up with, but anytime I work with people, I'm like, oh, this is my idea. The moment they chime in, it's already a better idea to help building blocks. And so it kind of turned into one of those things like, can I write this by myself? Yes. Am I going to have a much better time creating this with others and creating core memories? And that's kind of cemented into what mine has kind of turned into. Yeah. Will I do other things? Privately, yes, but I think it's going to be a lot more personal tales and whatnot and nuances. But the things like anything like wider publishing that I'd like to do, it's going to 100% be tabletop focused.
Okay, very cool.
He's a really good DM.
Sounds like it, yeah. With all of the interconnectivity of, so is there something where It's like you'll mention a name a few times, and do you have the expectation of the players that you should be paying
I
attention
expect
to?
my players to fuck everything immediately. So when I joined 4 Geeks by Geeks, I ran a campaign called Kingdom Come, and I wrote out such a linear story. I'm like, these are the beats that I want them to hit, and they hit those beats, don't get me wrong, but the way I thought they were hit those beats was not a straight line. They went to plot point F, came back to A, jumped down to Z, fucking rewrote the alphabet, put it in cursive, and made up a new language along the way. And so it's one of those things I had to very quickly learn and adapt how to tell the story I want to tell with player adaptation, because players don't do it on purpose. You can
We don't know the story that you
right. You can blatantly spell out like, this is the story I want to tell. And a lot of things that DMs do wrong is they're like, oh, this is my story. It's not your story.
Right.
It is our story. You brought the story to the table, but you cannot run with the story that is your story. And so I didn't come in with that mindset, but they taught me very, very quickly, how do you still tell your story with player narratives still directly impacting? Because at that point, I didn't know how to write about the little things impacting the little thing. I completely ignored the butterflies. I completely ignored the spiders. I only wrote about, oh, the dictators influenced this, but I never really wrote down why did they do this, when did they do this, how did they do this. And shout out to 225, his world building book, I think is a fantastic way to kind of help you get into the mindset of those types of questions that you don't think about in that grandiose space of the larger world building, because a lot of the times the things that you're going to write about in those little exercises aren't things aren't things that you're going to think about or even going to come up. But like Boser mentioned when he's teaching his kids how to do monologues, you have to know your backstory to be able to sell it, because people can tell when you're being fake, and not in a like, oh, you're posing, but in a you don't know why you're doing this, and that why is what really tells these stories to draw people in and make them feel at home. It makes them want to be deeper into that story, because
something to connect to.
It's something to connect to. Exactly. We all want to be heroes. We all want to be on the fucking final steps as the world is collapsing around them. It's just you and the BBEG. They're monologuing. You cast silence to shut them fuck up because we're over you monologuing. But you have to know, why are you doing this? How did you get there? When did you get there? What are you doing there? Or otherwise, because if you're only hitting one or two of those points, you're not connected to that story. And I think that's a lot of issues with people coming into any world building, is they're getting too general with it and there's no immersion.
Yeah, and I think that's I wish I had an easy way to describe it, but I think it's establish your characters first, but you come to fantasy for the world. Yes. Whatever that may be. And how do you put that in, but at the right rate and pace? You have to explain the world because of where am I? But manage, I'll call it a lore dump.
Yeah.
At the right time. Mm-hmm. Get people hooked on the characters first. Maybe give them a little taste of the world. Like, I know where I am. Oh, that sounds interesting. I wonder what that is. And explain it later.
You need your players to develop their opinions on things. Yeah. Because like you said, the lore dump's a great way to like, all right, here's your BBEG. Let me word vomit about why you hate him. But you don't know what your characters are. Maybe they don't hate them. Maybe they believe the same ideologies that your BBEG does, but they don't believe in the way they're going about it.
Right.
And I think it's a great, you phrase it very well. You got to tease them with it. You got to give them the little one-liners here. So they start connecting their own dots for why their character feels this way towards, not even the BBEG, just other characters in general. Like, I don't want to tell you how you feel. I want to know how you feel in this circumstance, because of this, on a rainy day, next to a campfire, a cool wind blows, you got some hot cocoa. What memory from your childhood are you like reminiscing about as you're experiencing this moment? Because that's what brings everything. It just brings so much more life and so much more depth to everything we're doing.
Yeah. So do you guys write in the same way? Like, I know that kind of thinking is very true, especially in like TTRPGs and storytelling as like a dungeon master. But is it the same exact process when you're putting it on paper into like I don't want to call it a linear story, but less collaborative, less improv story?
Go ahead, but this is all you.
Well, I think, that's all the elements that you want to like. What is the purpose of this? Boser, if I'm not answering your question, please let me know. But I think
basically, do you write the story the same way as you would as DM versus a book?
I would probably, the short answer is no. I think it depends on your players a lot too. Like what are they coming to the table for? Is it I want a few plot points? I want to know why I'm here, like for the story, but I'm really here to have fun, roll dice, kill monsters. That's really why I'm here. This other stuff is just nice to know.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of your players, or do they want to? Hey, you mentioned this name once. I've heard it again. Like, should I be thinking about that? Like, I think that's just player preference. But I think with the story, it's because it's always, if you're going to do a visual medium, there's pluses and minuses, there's advantages and disadvantages, but also writing. So these things you've got to slip in to create the tone, create the setting, which you may not need for D&D. Right? You want to kind of give them a little bit of a prompt with them, let them, maybe in describing a scene, maybe yes, where you give them a little bit, then let them fill in the details. So probably depends. Play style, I think, would be different than reading a book. You probably have a different expectation than being at a table, but a few lines of description may be enough, especially if that's your writing style. Maybe it's not like, here's this rich description. It's here's a few lines. You fill in the rest. Here's a few more a little bit later. So I think there's thematic themes. Wow. Yeah. Some themes that apply across both. So my answer for most world building is it depends. Like if we really get down to it, but I think there's things you can take from being a DM. And what hooks players, right? When do they kind of lean in? It's like, okay, I could probably use that in a book or another format too.
For me, when it comes to the TTRPG aspect, I write based off monologues because that is where you're going to get your large lore dumps. That's where you're going to get your narrative storytelling. And then as compared to when I'm doing any other format of writing, I write based off the scene that I'm working on. So when it comes to TTRPGs, I'm much more linear in the sense of this is going to be this beat. Even with their branches, these are the beats they're going to hit one way or the other. But when it comes to any other form of medium, I write scenes in such a wacky ass order because I go through it in like a storyboard aspect. I'm like, I have my plot points because I get to be linear with this. But with me, my issue is yes and no, but to the point where I will write myself out of the story I was writing into an entirely different story. So I have to say that again. I will write myself out of the story that I was writing into an entirely different story, entirely based off trying to go from A to Z. Because I'll get to the point, I'm like, oh, I'm writing about this. Oh, I like the way this could spin off, which this would lead into this, which this would lead. And next thing I know, I'm not even writing the story that I was originally writing. So I had to reformat my writing. So I storyboard everything out. So this chapter or this scene or this page. So I will write out my pages. I'm like, all right, so this is this, this is this, this and this. And then when I write my dialogue, I go through in a very generic way And so that way, so I can connect everything. And then a thing that I actually started doing recently is when it comes to like combat or like deeper, I will actually set up miniatures and move things around. So because I have whatever that thing is where you can't mentally picture things. So I will set up pieces on like my own personal game board and maneuver things so I can write in a sense where I can physically see what is going on.
Yeah.
That's smart.
But yeah, my writing versus my DMing, it's two polar opposites of my brain going on to tell those stories. It's pretty interesting.
I think a big point you mentioned that really is important, is pretty key, is the dialogue driven. That it's going to be that way at the table, unless you have a lot of immersive terrain and things like that. But the story, lean on dialogue, lean on the characters, having these discussions. And for me, sometimes chapters start with just a few lines of dialogue that'll pop in my head. Like, that's interesting. Like, I need them to be doing something as part of this overall story, but it's like, that's the hook to get into talking about whatever I need to happen, but also for the characters to, explain themselves a little bit, so to speak.
I very much so take it from the JRPG aspect, where you get a big monologue at the beginning, dialogue telling you the story in the middle, and then a big monologue at the end. And not even necessarily monologue, but just narrative direction. Because realistically, that's what you're doing at a table, is when you start your session, you're giving them your introduction, and then your body of either your story or whatever you're doing at that session, that's entirely player driven. And then it's up to you at the end, because you got to nail your conclusion if you're getting your players back for another week, or otherwise you don't nail that conclusion, that table's done. So you kind of have to put it in that sense of, you get the beginning, you get the end, everybody else gets the middle. And that middle is where you get your little drops. Your beginning and your end is where you get your recap, and where you get to truly feeling like, oh, you pulled on this thread, you didn't pull hard enough, so let me kind of expand on that one a little bit for you. Or you thought you opened the door into X, but really you opened it up into Y, and then leading that back into, okay, now you guys can go play with this new information as you see fit.
It's such like a spinning plate. Like, the more that we dig into these topics, like the more I'm like, how can anybody truly understand or even put into words like the thousands of plates that you're doing as a writer? Yeah, constantly, because you're balancing your audience attention, you're balancing the points in the story, you're balancing so many things. And I'm grateful that you were willing to come and hang out with us tonight and talk about those spinning plates.
Yeah.
If you guys haven't already, make sure you use Command Book and pick up your copy of In Times of War, A Tale of Ardalencor for only 99 cents tonight and into tomorrow. So if you're the first...
Tomorrow as well, yeah. I'll keep it open for tomorrow too, for sure. Yeah.
So if you're listening or watching this episode right away, then that link below is still live. Otherwise, if you've waited, you might just have to pay full price. What a tragedy. Support authors. Pay the man.
So for the space-time continuum, this will be through November 7th, 2023.
There you go. There you go.
Before somebody reviews, I had to pay full price for this book. When on the internet, he said I could get it for 99 cents.
And then you're just a jackass for complaining about paying full price for a book.
It's the internet. People don't care. They'll make it anonymous so they can be as rude as hell with no repercussions.
But hey, guys, how would you like to end with a game?
Let's play a game. What did John call it?
Some
magic or microorganism or something.
Magic or microorganism. That's what it was.
Because we put together a little game. Let me go to the top of my slides. But I made a whole slide.
And then you didn't save the slide?
I did. Is she cute?
Can you sing that title for me, please?
Is it fantasy or is it bacteria?
See, the thing I'm most disappointed about, I guarantee there's a screenwriter out there somewhere that has written this story.
This
is possible.
I will put money on it. This exists somewhere on the internet. There is a fanfic of this somewhere.
But here's how you play, guys. I have scoured the internet full of pretty sounding bacteria names. I've also gone to a random fantasy city name generator and created some pretty names there as well, or ones that sound like bacteria. I didn't prompt it to sound just like bacteria. I just kept hitting refresh until I found something I liked. So it's up to you to tell me if it's bacteria or fantasy. And we'll see who comes out on top, whether it's Andrew Zimba, T, or you at home in the chat. Are you ready to play?
I love that this is what you did at work today, was piece together this slideshow.
I actually waited till I got home. I really wanted to at work, but I had work to do apparently. Okay, here's fantasy or bacteria number 1. Leognathy. I can't pronounce these.
I'm going fantasy for this one.
I'll do the same. Yeah.
All right, they say fantasy. Chime in the chat as well. Leognathy is actually a bacteria.
Wow.
Also known as Photobacterium leognathy, because they burrow. Most creatures spend their lives. We got fun facts about bacteria, guys.
Ooh.
Most creatures spend their lives
Geeks for
avoiding hungry maws, but certain bacteria radiate a bright green color that's irresistible to nearby algae. Eaten but not digested, the bacteria known as Photobacterium leognathy glow within the plankton. Fish, in turn, munch on the newly bioluminescent plankton. The end result, like Jonah, the bacteria get free rides to part the oceans they've never reach alone.
Who wrote that?
The website I found it on. I did not.
It's got weirdly religious very fast.
No, it took a spin there at the end. We just slip in this Christianese real quick. All right, so that's a goose egg for both of you. I'm going to keep a score, actually. Andrew over here. T over here. One wrong. Okay. Number 2, Theo Margarita.
I'm not allowing Margarita to be a bacteria. This is for sure fantasy.
Yeah, same. Is this a word generator or this is a creation too? I'm thinking maybe.
All the fantasy names were not generated by myself, even though you would think so because it says Margarita.
I'm gonna go fantasy.
Fantasy. Truth is, it's a bacteria. Crazy. Theo Margarita nambiensis. Look at your hand, and you can't see teeming hordes of bacteria, but your skin is crawling with Theo Margarita nambiensis, sporting a name that means soulful pearl of Namibia, and clocking in at 3/4 of a millimeter in length. It's about 3 million times the size of an average bug. Think of a person, then imagine a person the size of an entire population of Chicago, and you'd have a sense of how unusually large Theo Margarita nambiensis is.
See, all this is telling me is we need Osmosis Jones 2, and I'm tired of them playing with me.
Oh my god, yes. That's the only thing. That and what's that anime that talks about like white blood cells? It's just called Cells. You familiar?
Nope.
Someone in the chat, you know it.
You lost me on that one.
John was right. He said, I'm going to say bacteria. John, you get a point. I'm going to add John to the scorecard.
Probably a safe bet.
John's got the lead.
All right, number 3. Munchin.
Does he give us 3 bacterias in a row?
Yeah, that's. I was thinking
Cells
that.
at work. Thank you, John. Cells at work. But yeah, that's the other part of this game. It's not just guessing.
It could all be bacteria.
It could all be bacteria. And I want to say bacteria to change up my answer, but I think I'm still fantasy.
I'm going to go fantasy as well, because I don't think he's going to do 3 in a row, but let's see.
You're going to guess 3 fantasies in a row.
Yeah.
Munchin is a fantasy.
Thank God. I was about to get real concerned.
Finally.
See, John's got a good thought process. It doesn't sound Greek or Latin to me.
That's a good, yeah.
So
good.
with fantasy ones,
job.
I added an added bonus. I need you to tell me, based on its name alone, what kind of inhabitants dwell there in your storytelling minds.
The
gonna
easy
say-
answer is dwarves and gnomes, but the irony in me means it's only giants and ogres.
I was going to say Goliath or giants. Yeah.
Mountain.
I see it as like on some mountain
Yep.
terrace or something like that. Yeah.
Okay, good. We're pulling at that story theme in your mind. You just can't turn it off. All right, you got a point. Good job. Tell me about Tol Umtsi.
I'm going to say fantasy.
I also got to go fantasy on this one.
That's like a classic.
It's too short a name and hyphenated.
Yeah, that the old hyphen is the giveaway.
The hyphen, you say? Well, let's find out if bacteria have hyphens. They don't.
Hey,
I almost took it out, but I'm like, no, that's what the generator gave me. I don't want to play this wrong. Tol
John's
Umtsi,
killing it over here.
fantasy. John, you're killing it. What is he, 3 for 3? Or you
think
didn't guess on
so.
the first one.
Well, that was the fourth one, so he's still doing well.
Okay. So, what did the inhabitants of Tol Umtsi last war over?
I don't like the mouthfeel of umpsy at all. I'm going to say they were fighting over gems.
I'll say fishing. I'll say fishing rights.
Ooh.
They thought they had like this, like off the coast of Newfoundland kind of thing, made massive reserves of fish. Somebody else started showing up. That's you don't touch their main business.
Listen, you don't fuck with fishers.
No.
Do we combine all those answers and these fish carry within them the lost gems of magic?
I like that. They're bottom feeders.
Yeah.
Yeah, how about that? They're bottom feeders.
There we go.
And they pry off these little stones off the
Yeah.
bottom of the sea.
Yes.
There we go.
But the water's acidic to the mortal touch, so only the
Yes.
fish can get down to
Yes.
it.
Yeah,
Collaborative storytelling. I love it.
I like it.
We could write a killer book, you guys. All right, next up. Wolbachia.
Oh, it's an Ia. That's a bacteria.
Because of the Ia.
Yep.
I'm gonna say that's fantasy. That sounds enough like actual places, like Wallachia. I'm gonna say that the generator just did a little bit of changing a few letters. I think it looks close enough to a real place. I'm gonna say fantasy, but it could very well be something else.
Okay, this will be the first time that you guys diverge on your guesses. So let's see who's right. T or Andrew. It's a bacteria.
Butterfly sex excite. What website were you on?
It was the top 10 most exciting bacteria. And this one's exciting because they make butterfly sex exciting. A bacteria called Wolbachia gets weird when it invades gonads of butterflies and other insects. As University of California, Santa Cruz microbiologist William Sullivan tells the Inverse, the bacteria live within the cells of insects and hang out in centrosome. I don't even know what that is. It does amazing things, he says. It's like mitochondria. It's inherited maternally, and because of that, from its perspective, it has no use for males in the population. So it'll kill off all the male insects or change a male to reproductive female or make an insect parthenogenetic so she doesn't have to mate.
I don't kink shame, but who looks at a butterfly like, I really want to watch you fuck?
A bacteria
I don't like it.
researchers.
Microbiologist William Sullivan, I'm very concerned.
That brings you in the lead now, T.
Woohoo!
You're up to 3 against Andrew's 2. Tell me about Loth Neathar.
Classic fantasy name.
That's 100% classic fantasy name.
That's pretty classic fantasy name. You're right.
How do you all feel about names that are? There's probably a few in a story that might be a bit of a tongue twister. But what's your thoughts on like how many? Like especially as a
crazy
new,
names?
Yeah, like crazy names, or it's not maybe intuitive how to pronounce.
For me personally, if it gets too complicated, it breaks the immersion for me almost immediately.
Yeah.
If you got to think too hard.
But I do appreciate those fantasy authors that like basically create their own language and give their own index for the language in the back in the cities. I do appreciate those. If you're going to go the route of like, I'm going to fuck with people's minds about how to pronounce this, you got to add a thesaurus in the back to tell me how all of these things work.
True.
So then we can nerd out and actually speak it like Elvish.
Exactly.
Or Klingon. So tell me, what kind of climate does Loth-Niathar have?
Fungus, and it rains acid.
Nice.
I think that's a better answer than I had.
Yeah, I want to hear it. No such thing as better here.
I was going to say more of a jungle type environment, but not with the destructive, you can't live here kind of a thing.
Or the residents are unharmed by the acid, or...
Yeah.
Evolutionarily.
Yeah. Yeah. I like it.
So they're feared because they can survive in this toxic biome. So get all these created like mythos and legends created about them about how they're capable of doing so.
Yeah.
They're
they're
outsiders because people don't understand.
Warring with the fishing nation because they're swimming in the ocean of acid, catching up all those fish and the gems.
I love it.
Yeah. See, we're coming full circle now.
It's all come together. Yeah.
By the end of it, I knew we'd have a story. All right, tell me about King Ella.
Bacteria,
yeah.
Really? Even though it's got the word king in it?
Yeah.
I thought that would throw you. Yeah, it's bacteria. Nope. I'm like, oh, this one has king. Definitely they're going to guess fantasy.
John's killing it over here. I'm impressed.
Did he guess bacteria too?
Yeah.
Wow. John, you were correcto mundo. 6 for 6. But a little fun fact about King Ella. Until recent advancement in diagnostic techniques, King Ella, King A. Okay, if I had both of those, I think you would have guessed fantasy. Who was thought to be a rare bacteria. King Ella, King A is now considered a significant cause of pediatric bacteremia and bone infections in children aged 6 to 48 months. It's one of those etiologies of daycare disease outbreaks in the United States and other countries. And blah, 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 blah. This one was not from the fun website. This is from a different website.
You know, the actual educational website.
All right, tell me about Xylosoxidans.
Fantasy.
Yeah.
Reptilian race for sure.
Fantasy. Yeah.
Fantasy. John?
Yeah. John, what's the right answer?
I'll wait. It's actually bacteria!
You got me.
Wow.
All I could find on it was Acromobacter species are gram-negative, rod-shaped bacteria that inhabit soil and water. They are not normal flora for humans. John knows all the Latin. That's how he's pulling ahead. But I'm just proud to have gotten you guys sometimes. Still 3-2. T's in the lead with John wiping you both out with 100%.
Well done, John. Yeah, well done.
Tell me about Wofi.
Nah, it's fantasy. It's too much similar to lo-fi.
Okay. Yeah, fantasy again.
Honestly, when I saw it, I thought it must be like a typo because it doesn't seem like any of these letters are in the right space. LWOFII. For those listening on podcast, it's a bacteria. Acinetobacter luofi. I don't even know how you pronounce it. Luofi. It's shaped like a rod. It is usually distributed in nature and the hospital environment, and it's found in water and soil, on fruits and vegetables, and on healthy human skin. You guys are going to load so much more for your trivia night when they have a bacteria category.
That's true.
John, I got John. He said fantasy.
You finally got John. Now it's time to go out on a win.
A mathlin.
Fantasy.
I'm going to say bacteria just because I've been wrong most of the time. I'm going to go against what I think it is. So I'm going to say bacteria.
Oh, okay. So you're actively going against your intuition.
Yes.
Guessing bacteria. T says fantasy. It's fantasy. I couldn't remember what this one was actually. So, what is the main rare resource in a Mathlin?
Ooh.
Oh, I got John twice. He said bacteria.
I think it's a radioactive light that they're able to encapsulate inside of gems.
The gems in the ocean?
I don't know why I'm stuck on gems today, but here we are. I think
So,
it's on my Final Fantasy. I'm getting too caught up in Aether.
It does sound like a rare earth mineral, but I was thinking that I heard something that vultures can basically eat anything. Like they can eat anthrax, right? So
Really?
yeah, this is what the lady at the Renaissance Festival said as they were flying the different raptors and they brought out a vulture. And they can eat anything. So if there was something like an assassin's guild, or you wanted to against poisoning, maybe you use this in your D&D campaign. Is there some way to like harvest the stomach of a vulture?
Cool, yeah.
Like necrotic damage or poison, but I would think if you're going to ingest this, like to get this antidote to other things, like it can be very straining on yourself. So there's probably a con save, maybe a few, not overly mechanical, but like you got to commit to this.
Mm-hmm.
I like it.
But then you could go to like some feast with people, maybe you don't trust them so much, but like, I'm fine, everything's good, and maybe that's what their specialty is, that the only people can harvest this, and it's like such a rare commodity, especially it's a luxury good for people in high positions, merchants or nobles or things like that's like their premium product. If you want the upsell, you go get the vulture stomach concoction.
I like it. And that's where you can only get it in a Mathlin.
In a Mathlin, yes.
Make sure you go follow him on Instagram for more D&D items. Okay, I think this might be the last one. Del Bruecki.
We're going out on a wild bacteria.
I'll say the double I, like I think that might have Latin roots too. Kind of looks Slavic with the CK double I as well, which could be from a generator.
And John's with us on the bacteria.
I'm going to go bacteria though.
All right.
In John we trust.
In John we trust. He says bacteria, so it must be bacteria! Lactobacillus delbruecki. Species are gram-positive rod-shaped bacteria that are common flora of the skin and digestive tracts of humans and animals. The more
Bacteria
you know.
be
Oh, I had one
wild.
more.
Oh, one more.
I lied. We had one more. Boom. Boom.
Goridlith.
Goridlith.
Fantasy.
What can Goridlith do for you? You want to go fantasy?
That sounded very commercial. Let's see. It's fantasy. And what do the people of Goridlith treasure most as a community?
I'm going to say there's one of the few places that firebirds or phoenix, I don't know what the plural for phoenix is offhand, maybe it is phoenix, but it's one of the few kind of like nesting areas.
I like that.
It's primarily within their territory.
They're the sworn protectors of them.
Yeah.
Dig it.
Yes. Yeah. No matter what else is happening, they got to keep them safe. And there's culture and maybe some religious connotations to it too.
I like it.
I would read that book. And I'd also read In Times of War, A Tale of Ardalencor.
Get it now for 99 cents.
Yes. Through November 7th, 2023.
Boom! Turns out, by the end of it, T knows his fantasy bacteria just slightly better than you do, Andrew.
T, well done, John. Well done.
Well played. Well played.
Yeah.
John knows it best.
Boser,
really
that was fun.
I really liked the shooting from the hip story ideas. Now there's like 4 of those that I think you guys need to incorporate in your next stories or D&D campaigns. Or you at home. let us know when you do, and make sure that you go follow Andrew on the account is Ardalencor on Instagram, right?
Yes, yeah. At Ardalencor on Instagram, like you said. And also, if you want longer format world building tips and things, andrewzimba.substack.com. And also check out the book on Amazon as well. Yeah, thank you for posting the link.
Yes, of course. You can visit him for all your world building tips and just to compare notes. And I love that by the end of it, this conversation just really became like almost a geek out sesh for all of us, just about the idea of storytelling and like our own methods.
Yeah.
So thanks for letting us share in that.
It's an awesome topic, and it's never ending, right? It's always another angle to it. So yeah, it's been fun. Thank you guys.
Thanks for coming on, bud. Really looking forward to diving into this book.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
He'll finish it much, much faster than I will.
He's like, when's the next one? I'm like, well.
Listen, if it's good, I will hound you on a monthly basis. All right, motherfucker, I need a fucking progress update here.
Okay, I can give you that. I can for sure give you that.
Do we have an ETA on when the next volume will be released?
I think year end next year, if things continue to go, it'll be faster than the prior one, but still some work to be done. But
You're not
hopefully,
starting from scratch.
yeah. I mean, that's the big thing. Like the cast of characters is basically set. There'll be a few new people. Some will exit, some will join. But yeah, hopefully end of year next year, somewhere on there.
Nice.
All right. We'll be watching for that. And I hope all of you
Yeah,
are
cool.
watching at home. But thank you so much for joining us for tonight's Geek Out Sesh. You can tune back in every Monday night at 8:30 Eastern Standard, live here on Twitch, or again on podcasts and YouTube. And then come back on a Wednesday when T is doing whatever makes the dopamine hits, like live here on stream. What are you doing lately, T?
Right now, we're painting models from Power Rangers Heroes of the Grid.
Nice. It's just an opportunity for him to vibe out and you to tell him about your day, just geek out with each other. And then on Thursdays, our ongoing campaign of Fate Core called Cloudscape. We are about to begin releasing episodes. We took a little break there to catch up on recording them, but I'm really excited where the story's at, and I hope you are joining us for that.
And perfect time for you to catch up on YouTube or anywhere you get your podcasts. You can get all 17 episodes, so you can dive right into the new episode coming soon.
But until next time, I am Boser.
I'm T.
Who are you?
I'm Andrew Zimba.
And I didn't talk him through this part. And you just keep geeking out.
Geeking out.
Geeking out.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.